Today, we're diving into one of history's most chilling and mysterious episodes, a story about a series of warnings that came right before the complete and utter destruction of a city.
Seriously, think about that. What if, right before a city was basically wiped off the map, the sky and even the buildings themselves were screaming out a warning? Well, that is the incredible story we're exploring today, the strange, terrifying omens that appeared just before the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD.
So let's set the scene. We're in Judea, middle of the 1st century. Tensions with the massive Roman Empire are at an absolute breaking point. And the glorious city of Jerusalem is, completely unknowingly, on the very brink of annihilation.
Now, how do we know about all these strange events? Well, our main source is a guy who was actually there to see it, Flavius Josephus. He was a Jewish commander who later became a Roman historian, and he documented the whole war in stunning detail, including this bizarre series of events that he and a lot of others believed were divine warnings.
And here's what makes this so compelling. Josephus wasn't the only one who wrote about this stuff, not by a long shot. Other major historians of the time, like the Roman senator Tacitus and the early Christian scholar Eusebius, they recorded remarkably similar things happening. So this isn't just one man's wild story. It's a historical phenomenon, reported from multiple, independent sources.
So what did they actually see? Well, the first batch of omens showed up where literally everyone could see them, up in the sky.
Okay, imagine looking up at the sky above your home, and for an entire year, there's a star that looks just like a sword, the universal symbol of war, hanging directly over your city. Josephus describes it as either a star or a comet, but either way, it was a constant, looming threat in the sky.
But then, the warnings got way more explicit and, frankly, terrifying. Just before sunset, witnesses all across the region started reporting visions of a spectral army just materializing in the clouds. Phantom chariots, soldiers in full armor, all seen maneuvering in surrounding cities, almost like they were rehearsing for the real invasion.
And this is where the different historical accounts just lock in with incredible precision. Josephus writes about chariots and troops running about among the clouds. And then you have Tacitus and Eusebius writing completely independently, describing a vision of armies in conflict wheeling through the clouds. The phrasing, the imagery, it's almost identical. It's pretty wild. So let's shift our focus from the skies above down to the very heart of the city itself, the Holy Temple, which was the most sacred site in all of Judaism. Because here, the signs got even more direct and a lot more frightening.
During one of the major festivals, right in the middle of the night, the most sacred part of the temple was suddenly just flooded with a light so incredibly intense that it looked like broad daylight. And this wasn't a flash. This supernatural glow lit up the altar for a full 30 minutes. At another festival, something happens that just seems biologically impossible. A cow, a heifer, is being led to the altar to be sacrificed, and it gives birth. But it doesn't give birth to a calf. It gives birth to a lamb. You can just imagine the people there. The symbolism of a sacrificial lamb appearing at that exact moment must have been deeply, deeply unsettling. Now, the eastern gate of the temple's inner court. This thing was a monster. It was made of solid brass, and it was so heavy it took a crew of 20 men to shut it every single night. Well, one evening, the guards watched in shock as this massive gate just swung open, all by itself. The city's leaders saw it as a terrifying sign. The temple's defenses were gone. Its gates were now wide open to the enemy.
But perhaps the most chilling omen of all happened during the Feast of Pentecost. Priests who were serving deep inside the temple, they first felt a tremor, then they heard a great noise, and after that, they heard a clear, unified voice, as if a huge crowd was speaking as one, that said, "Let us remove hence. Let us leave this place." The interpretation was terrifying. It was the voice of God, the divine presence, abandoning the temple to its fate. It's an event that sounds eerily like the prophecies Jesus gave in the Gospel of Matthew, when he predicted that not one stone of that very temple would be left on top of another.
So we've got signs in the sky, we've got impossible events in the temple. But the final warning, that was human. It came from the mouth of one single man, a lonely prophet of doom.
His name was Jesus, son of Ananus. And no, not that Jesus. It was a pretty common name back then. This Jesus was just a simple farmer who, 4 full years before the war even started, just showed up at a festival and began to cry out this terrible warning, walking the streets day and night,
over and over again.
He was arrested, of course. He was brought before the Roman governor and whipped so badly that his bones were exposed. But he never cried out in pain, never begged for mercy. With every single lash, he just repeated his phrase, "Woe, woe to Jerusalem." For more than 7 years, he kept up this same haunting chant. And his story has this unbelievable, tragic ending. The Roman siege of Jerusalem finally begins, and he's up on the city wall, still shouting his warning. He cries out, "Woe, woe to the city again, and to the people, and to the holy house." But then, for the first and only time, he adds a new line. "Woe, woe to myself also." At that exact moment, a stone fired from a Roman catapult flew through the air, struck him, and killed him instantly.
So you have phantom armies in the sky, impossible signs in the most holy place, and a 7-year prophecy that was fulfilled down to the very second. So how did the people of Jerusalem react to all this?
Well, this is the real tragedy of the whole story, at least according to Josephus. He writes that the people were like men in a trance, infatuated. Maybe they were just so caught up in the fervor of rebelling against Rome that they simply refused to believe anything that wasn't promising them victory. The signs were obvious, the warnings were clear, but they were ignored.
And then, in the year 70 AD, everything the omens had been pointing to finally came to pass. The Roman legions, led by their general Titus, surrounded the city, and they began one of the most brutal and horrific sieges in all of ancient history. After months of brutal fighting, starvation, and even cannibalism inside the walls, the city finally fell. It was systematically torn down, and the magnificent temple was burned and completely destroyed, never to be rebuilt again.
So, what are we supposed to make of all this? Were these actual, genuine divine warnings? Was it a case of mass hysteria gripping a society that was under unimaginable stress? Or are these just historical curiosities, recorded by people trying to make sense of a horrific national tragedy? The accounts from Josephus and Tacitus don't really give us any easy answers. They just tell us what they saw and what they heard, leaving us, 2,000 years later, to wonder what happens when a warning from history goes unheeded.